I'm your host, Carlo, and I'm here with Brenden. How are you, Brenden?
Yeah, good yourself?
Good, thank you. We've had a really busy last couple of weeks, haven't we?
Yeah, 100%.
Just getting used to my new job and building out different networks and understanding what my new job entails. So that's been super busy, plus my sleep, like the rhythm of working the new job, especially because it's in the afternoons. It's taken me for a spin, but you know what, that's what we're all about, just building resilience and just being able to adapt.
Yeah, that's what you got.
Yeah, and so, alright, so straight to the point, what are we talking about today?
Circle of influence today.
That's a big topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of those topics where you go, do I have a good influence? Do I have a bad influence? Are the people around me good? Are they bad? Because I found that we like to label things like good, bad, ugly, whatever. Like it's easy for us to categorize different things. And the one thing that we seem to categorize the most is people, because people can do us harm, people can do us good, people can be surprising, people can be chaotic, people can be calm. And so it's one of those all-encompassing emotional aspects of the human experience, being able to be an influence in a circle as well as being influenced by others in your circle. And so when we talk about circle of influence, we're asking ourselves, are we promoting others to build their lives, or are we spiraling down a path that may not be good for us long term? And so with that being said, how would you define circle of influence?
I just think it's the people around you and how they affect the way you go about life, the decisions you make, the standards you set. They're the main two things that, your habits, all them sort of things as well. It even goes down to the sayings you have and like the little phrases and all them sort of things, what you pick up.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of what I've noticed about myself is the people that I used to hang out with versus like who I hang out with now and who I choose to be around. And so some people you can't choose. So for example, your family. You can choose your family, as in your friends that become family, and how they involve themselves and how you involve yourself in their life. You aren't going to choose who raised you, essentially. And so if there is an aspect in your lineage where you're not really fond of the way that you were brought up or the way that things happen, then that's something that needs to be dealt with. And so you either make peace with it and let it go, or you confront it and you have a conversation with that person where having a circle of influence that isn't positive, but you do nothing about it, it poisons you. And it poisons your ability to do well because your focus is more on them rather than what you're actually doing. And so by creating a new circle, by having people that inspire you to do better, people that set the standard for you to follow, then it inspires you to then set your own standard and then build your own philosophy on life, so that then you're better able to navigate in a way that's conducive with the life that you want. And oftentimes what happens is that we get comfortable where we are because it's familiar and because we repeat things so consistently, but at a subconscious level as well, that we're not completely aware of, that sometimes we end up just sabotaging ourselves because of the circle of influence that we have. And so my understanding of this is that for your circle to change, you need to change the way that you perceive yourself. Because if you perceive yourself as just some person that goes out on weekends, spends all his money and does all different things that have no net positive outcome for himself or the people around him, that's who you'll be. And if you perceive yourself as somebody with high standards who follows the likes of those who set high standards either in their own lives or on social media. Social media is a really good way to really audit who you are, because social media isn't just a networking platform. It's actually an algorithm, and it's more a mirror than anything else. So all the things that you like, all the things that you follow, all the things that you comment on, it's just a reflection of how you perceive yourself. And that has a big determining influence on who you have in your circle. So by actually taking an audit of yourself, you're better able to perceive who you think you are. And then by changing who you think you are, that circle can change, and then you can elevate. If that's not done, it won't happen. It's just as simple as that. That's my understanding and perspective currently. It may change, but from my experience and what I'm currently going through now, because I'm going through my own metamorphosis, I'm able to distinguish that how I perceive myself is the most important factor when it comes to determining a circle of influence. What about you?
Yeah, 100%. In terms of your self-perception, if you set yourself at, say, 40 degrees on the thermostat, and good things happen to you a lot of the time and get you above that 40 degrees, a lot of time we go back to that set 40 degrees because that's what we're used to. We're used to people not sort of commenting on us in these certain ways and having these particular habits to stick to that temperature. Whereas if we raise that temperature for ourselves, what we're expecting of ourselves, we not only improve everything in our own lives, but the people around us are going to improve as well, because they can see that you're leading by example there and you're changing things to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's like the thermostat and the thermometer example, right? Where the thermostat, like you set the temperature, like you said, whereas a thermometer, the environment dictates how the thermometer moves, and so then what temperature it stays at. And so both of them have their place. Like I hear all the time, be the thermostat, not the thermometer, and it's true to the extent that you understand completely that you are in control of your own life, where if you complain about how things the way they are, but you're not doing anything to change them, then by being the victim, then you're not changing, and things just continue to perpetuate. And so that's why the thermometer example is a really good illustration of what that looks like, because the thermometer will fluctuate every time the temperature changes. And so it's true that that's what happens. Like there's no denying that. Like it will fluctuate regardless of if the temperature changes or not. And so a thermostat, on the other hand, it sets the temperature, it sets the standard. So whatever happens externally, it will always remain what the thermostat has on its gauge. And so by understanding this distinction, you can go, okay, I'm going to base my circle of influence with people that set the same standard, who are also thermostats. You might get a couple of thermometers in there because that's in people's nature. It's in people's nature to be subject to the environment, which is why when someone who is around negative people will likely be negative, where someone who's around positive people are likely to be more positive. And so despite being a thermostat, you will also be a thermometer. And so where you are will partially dictate how you feel, what you do, what your habits are, what your behaviors are, and where you go in life. And who you are and what you do should matter more to you than to anybody else, which is how you become a thermostat. And so by having a positive circle of influence, that would mean that you need to, like I said, audit yourself on a consistent basis, thoroughly, to the degree that sometimes it might come across as borderline manic, where you're constantly asking questions about who you are, what you're doing, which direction that you're taking, and at the same time also learning to just stop and to just be where you are exactly is also very important. And having a good circle of friends who can tell you the truth and also celebrate what you're doing and the progress that you're making is absolutely essential for any sort of success, anytime. Because if you've got someone who doesn't celebrate your success and either shits on you or doesn't really do anything when you are winning, they're also the type of people that when you're losing, they'll be the ones laughing at your face and saying, "I told you so."
Yeah.
And they're not the people that you want around you. And so just knowing that your circle of influence has more of an effect than you think, but also at the same time, you as a person has more strength and more resilience than you think, and you also can make a significant difference to your own and other people's lives, shouldn't be unaccounted for. And so having the perspective of understanding both sides, both the thermometer and the thermostat, that will really help you determine the circle of influence, because without it, you will always just be subject to everyone else's approval, everyone else's feelings towards something that you're doing or that you're saying, and it will eat at you because you're not really actively going, "You know what, this is what I have to say, this is what I'm doing," and it doesn't matter what anyone else says. You're constantly just needing the validation, the approval, and everything else. Yeah, those things are great. Like, those things are needed because humans are social creatures, but it's disproportionate. It's like the validation is disproportionate to the actual either achievement or this sense of feeling. And so when your validation's up here, but the actual event's here, then you have this heightened sadness. And if it's the other way around, where the approval's here, or the need for approval's here, and the actual event's like here, it's like you're a stoic, right? Like, imagine doing something so significant that it changes the course of your life, but you feel nothing. Like, how hollow would that be, right?
Yeah.
Where if you do absolutely nothing, but you feel like that you deserve all the success in the world despite doing nothing, like, how egotistical do you have to be to figure out that you're not entitled to shit, right? And so having people that tell you the truth, despite you not wanting to hear it, is really important. People that celebrate what you're doing, despite knowing that you're struggling, that's also really fucking important. And so just being able to decisively use both in the appropriate context, dude, that's magic. And that there aren't a lot of people that I'm currently aware of, not even myself. I'm not at that stage, I feel, that I understand that distinction. I'm aware of it, but to actually practice it and to do it at a level where I'm fully conscious and I'm fully aware of it, and then do it enough to make it subconscious, I'm not there yet. And so, but knowing this information can be really helpful to different people, because then it allows them to go, "Hey, you know what? I don't actually need the permission, or I don't need the approval from others around me to do what I want to do," because then I attract the people that will eventually come into my life due to the changes that I've made for myself. And so having a good circle of influence is a big deal.
Yeah, 100%. And it's up to you at the end of the day as well. There's the old story about the alcoholic father having two sons, and one takes his father's path and becomes an alcoholic as well because that's what he knows, and his other son is completely sober because he knows the negative effect that it's had on his father. It's what road you decide to take yourself. You've got the power to make the decision of yourself, and everyone has different interpretations of that.
And it's also interesting too that I used to be an alcoholic, and it wasn't because my father was an alcoholic either. My father didn't drink too much. Like, he'd like to have a few, but he wasn't the binge drinker, or he wasn't that person who would always just turn up drunk at parties and just go crazy. My grandfather, on the other hand, was like my father's father, and so my father saw that and he was like, "No, I don't want that for myself," and so he didn't. And so, but then I came, and then the first thing that I did was drink really heavily from 17 to at the end of my early 20s. And so when I did drink, the story that I would always play in my head was that like I needed to drink, like I needed to fit in because that's what my circle was doing.
Mm.
Back then I didn't realize that I could just change my circle, where I felt that everyone else is doing it, so like I should do it. And so when I realized that I no longer needed the permission, and that circle of influence wasn't influencing me in a positive manner, then I just gave it up. And so for me, I was very fortunate because, like I said, I wasn't raised in a family where alcohol was very prevalent. Like it was just mostly beer at dinner or special events, like we'd have a few drinks.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I wasn't raised in an alcoholic household. So for me, being able to give that up was quite simple. And so for someone who is struggling with that, then it's knowing that having the autonomy and the power to make a different choice, it's the hardest at the beginning. And then moving on to the subsequent choices that you make about not spending money on alcohol or not drinking, by telling a different story, you'll have a different outcome. And so by building on your momentum and doing what you said that you were going to do, and by having those circle of good people that you start to become accustomed to and that you network with who are helping you on your way to sobriety, dude, that's a big deal. Like that's an absolutely big deal. And so I've been there. Like I got drunk with mates at parties when I was 17 years old. And back then, like I was just saying, oh, this is the thing to do. And I stopped drinking. When I stopped drinking, it was because it was New Year's Eve, and I don't know if I told this story before on the podcast, but it was New Year's Eve, and I was seeing this chick, and I told her, oh, I'm gonna stop drinking, and she's like, yeah, sure, right. And I really liked this chick at the time, and so out of spite, I said, well, you know what, fuck you, I'm gonna stop drinking, right? And then I quit, and so, like I said, I was very fortunate, and so being able to make that choice at the beginning is always the hardest. And so by consistently making the hard choices, you'll always get the better outcomes. By making easy choices, well then you don't know whether the outcome's going to be good or not. Where making the hard ones, well, you know what, it can't be any worse than making a hard choice, right?
Yeah.
Where making an easy choice, it could be a whole lot worse. Because you're at the top of the barrel with the easy choice. With the hard choice, you're at the bottom of the barrel, so you can only go up from there. And so by knowing that the choice is yours, that changes everything.
I've never really had sort of alcohol as like a prominent thing in the household either. My mum wouldn't drink much, if anything, in the past, and my dad's never sort of drank much either. Maybe on a special occasion have 1 or 2 beers at the most, but that's it. And that sort of brought me up, just not just with alcohol, but with other things. I feel it's had a positive impact on the person that I've become because of the influence they've had on me. I've only really been pretty drunk once. That was in Vegas, and I'm not going to tell that story.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Exactly, you beat me to it.
Stays in Vegas.
Exactly. Keith knows. But so that's had a really positive impact on me, and it goes with your circle of influence on how you deal with negative things that happen to you as well. Like, do you put your head down and keep working to try and solve the problem, or do you turn to alcohol, drugs, and all those sorts of things, and partying all the time to get over something bad that's happened to you? Like, the people that are around you will determine what decision you make as well, and it's obviously up to you as well to make that decision. But I feel they play a big part as well in what happens.
Those stuck in vice are stuck in ice.
Yeah.
As the saying goes, like if you're stuck in a vice, then you're likely going to stay frozen. You're likely going to stay still. And so having people that are always encouraging you is super important. People that are telling you the truth, absolutely necessary. Having both, like I said, is magical. where if someone can tell you the truth without sounding judgy or snobbish or anything like that, and someone who can celebrate with you without sounding insincere, it's magic.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times people have their own problems that they face, and because they don't speak up or they don't have a good network of people around them, then what tends to happen is then they project their own issues onto other people. And so like I had a conversation with someone and I told them that I wanted to move to Italy. The first thing they said is you wouldn't last 5 seconds in Italy, right? And so out of all the things that they could have said, right, it's because they have this projection that our generation is softer than theirs.
Yeah.
So, and because that's a strong belief that they hold, which may or may not be true, but at the same time, based on that belief itself, again, that's the first thing that was said to me. And so understanding where things come from, like what someone says and where they actually come from, that's super important. Like, again, I've mentioned before, I've had the same conversation with the same person. They said to me, oh, you don't have $2 in your pocket, right? And I said to them, well, I do have $3,500, right? And more. And so the thing is, people just assume. And assumptive people, they might have a clue about certain things, but then about other things, they have no idea. And because they think that they have the clues of the other things means that they're knowledgeable in other areas that they don't know, right? And so it's not completely true. Having those people in your circle is a problem. And by removing them, you remove the problem. When they are the type of people who might be your immediate family, then that's a big choice. Because sometimes you're in a position where you can't move out, or you don't want to move out, or you don't want to make a hard choice because that means you've got to leave a world behind. And so that's also part of creating an influence. It means that sometimes you're going to have to step out of what's familiar and do what's uncomfortable. And being able to do that and knowing that you're not going to die, then that's something else as well. But that's got to be felt internally as well. And by having a good circle of influence, you may not have to feel that way in any circumstance whatsoever. But having a toxic influence and having people around that don't understand this, that can be detrimental for the both of them. Because the person who is well-meaning but ignorant doesn't see that the effect that they're having on that person. Meanwhile, that person who is silently suffering also doesn't see the effect that they're having on the other person, because the other person doesn't care, but then that person silently suffering also doesn't care. So then it dispels both of them, it cancels both of them out, it cancels each other out. And that's good for nobody. And so by having people that positively encourage you, but also tell you the truth, but then also do it in a manner that doesn't sound snarky and sincere on either side, like I said, is magic. I've experienced that. Like, I went to the Gathering of Men event in Queensland, which is held every year, and I was joined by 100, 150 guys who were in predicaments that I was in and felt the way that I felt. And so I had that initial bond with them and I could relate. And so being able to actually be open and expressive and compassionate, like, it allowed me to actually then express all of my emotions, because I was listening to a comedy skit a couple of days ago and they were saying that men are only allowed to have two feelings: mad and it's fine, right? So like, men just go, right? Oh, he's mad, he'll get over it, he just go for a walk, this and that, right? And then I'm fine, right? So, oh, hey, Brenden, how's things on? Oh, I'm fine. You sure? Well, yeah, I just said I'm fine. And then they go back to anger again, right? And madness. And it's like, yeah, and then the last part, the punchline was that we feel all the sentimental stuff, like a nice sunset and just romance and things like that. It's called being gay, right? And so in the old generation, that's what they'd call it. Like, they'd call that sentimentality gay. And so it just sort of restricted everybody from being able to express a full spectrum of emotion, and it just narrowed it down to two, right? One, if they were really unlucky and they couldn't get mad and they just have to stay calm all the time. And I've experienced that myself. Having a good circle of people, you will be allowed to use all of your emotions, and people will be understanding because you're a human being and you have an existence that matters to people. And so by knowing that you exist and that you matter and then you're allowed to have a full spectrum of emotions, then you're able to actually build yourself up. Because yes, things have been built out of anger and out of spite, right? Because people have just gone, well, fuck you, I'm gonna go and do that. And they go and do it. And then they burn themselves out, and then they either crash out or just blow all their money or resort to alcohol, drugs and other things. And so by not being accepting and not being encouraging, like, you take away half of somebody's motivation, because things that motivate people are pleasure and pain, right? And so pain is more for men. I'm just using men as an example. Pain tends to be more of a driver than pleasure, because men, when they experience too much pleasure, tend to be really hedonistic and not actually pursue anything. Whereas if a girl breaks their heart, or someone betrays them, or their best friend cheats on their girlfriend or partner or whatever, right? Men just go through the absolute shitter to get ripped, to get rich, and to just absolutely dominating whatever it is that they're doing. Where if a person's just given everything, then what tends to happen is that they tend to just sort of slow down. It's like they're nerfed, right? Some people who are given everything tend to do better because they operate out of love, where a lot of people, especially guys, they operate out of pain. Whereas women, from my experience, they operate the other way around, where if they're given a lot of love, then they reciprocate a lot of love back. If they're given a lot of pain, they reciprocate a lot of pain back. Where men, we're the opposite, where if we're given a lot of love, we don't feel as though that we deserve it. And then if we're given a lot of pain, we go, hey, you know what, fuck you, and we just go balls to the wall, right? And so having a good circle allows for you to still go balls to the wall, but also accept the love that you're given. And so being able to not only nurture yourself and develop yourself, but to then develop other people in your circle as well, that's the best way to not only grow yourself, like as a human being, but it also helps develop others. So then others can develop others. And you and I, like, we have like our own circle and we build everybody else up. But then you also have a circle with some other mates who you like to go out with and have a good time. I'm meeting new people and going out and having a good time. And so what we do together as a duo, we then are able to spread and do good for others because of the bond that we've created. And so, which is why, like, you and I go really well, where others sometimes, they tend to attach to one another due to their attachment style, and sometimes it can be problematic because what they're actually doing is projecting onto one another. And so if you are projecting anger, or you are projecting envy, or you're projecting sadness, or whatever it may be, you're only poisoning each other, more so yourself as well. And so taking what you audit from yourself and how you go about your own self-examination, then take a look at all of your relationships and how you contribute to those relationships. If you don't water those relationships, well then obviously the relationships will be futile. They'll be weak, and then they'll end up just breaking. If they are strong, then by continuing to water them, they get stronger, they get better, they develop really well. They foster so well that they can bloom. And so you might not need to water them as much, but then you still water them from time to time so that then it stays as it is. And so developing a good circle, it builds that soil, it builds that foundation so that then when it does bloom, everyone else gets to see it too. And so it's beautiful having such a positive circle. It's also important to recognize the negative ones. because there's also a lesson in those.
Mm.
And so it's not for you to go and stay in, it's for you to go, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's a really negative way to look at things, but you know what? Okay, here it is. Like, you're meant to climb over the mountain, not carry it with you, like the old saying goes. And so if you are in a situation where you're moving a mountain rather than climbing over it to see the view, then it might be time to put the mountain down and figure out how to climb up it instead of just with it, and then finally move on. Which is the whole reason why I go to therapy in the first place. Like, because there are things that have happened that I haven't been able to yet move on from. And so even in just today's talk, like a lot of the things that I've said, like I've only just thought about now as well, and why it matters, because I went through a whole lot of stuff. And so that's more stories for a different day, but it allowed for me to realize how important having a good circle is. And it builds character, and it builds an understanding and an opportunity for me to do better and to help whoever I can in whatever way possible.
Yeah, I find when people, first of all, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me.
That's my...
Like my old maths teacher, Mr. Dempsey, said in Year 7. I found that hilarious when I first heard it.
It sticks
so
with you, eh?
Yeah. That was close to 20 years ago. So and I still remember it.
Shout out to Mr. Dempsey.
Yeah. So, first of all that, but when people put you down, it can stop you from doing things as well. Depends on how you build yourself up as well, like how much confidence you've built through discipline, through doing actions repeatedly and making promises to yourself, but could easily stop you from, say, for example, in the gym, it could stop you from wanting to compete, or could stop you from wanting to do a big squat, go for a PB. All them things have a bit of a contribution to stopping from doing them things. So those people around you can have a massive effect, especially if you haven't built yourself up as much through practicing stuff to create discipline and confidence. And so you've got to sort of decide on which way you want to take it.
Yeah, it's interesting because people, like the old saying goes, the same boiling water that softens the softens the egg, hardens the potato. Oh, hang on. Hardens the egg and softens the potato.
Yeah.
Right? And so sometimes being hard and being disciplined might harden someone up who might need it, right? But for another person, it might soften them up to the point where they don't want to do anything at all.
Yeah.
And so for me, I've found that growing up, I had this sense that I knew more than I should have. And so I could pick things up quite easily, that I would get the right answers in class and do my best and be the best. And so what inspired me to be the best was that I had the opportunity to be the best and be the number one and be the center of attention. I got it because I also had 3 younger siblings who I was competing for attention. And so then when I didn't get it, I thought, being smart at school, doing well in sports, I was going to get the attention that I wanted. That didn't happen either, which again, frankly, disappointed me, right? But I also grew up where discipline was getting smacked, or discipline was getting the silent treatment, or discipline was going to my room and things like that. And so, they weren't bad things, but also at the same time, for me, I felt less compelled to be better because I would be neglected or dejected in the sense that I did something wrong, this is what needed to be done in order to correct that wrong. And it's well, I don't think so. Hey, Carlo, you did this. This is not the way we do things here, okay? This is the way that we do things. This is what you're going to do as a consequence of your actions, right? And this is a reminder for you not to do it again. Right? I didn't get that talking to. And I know that I would have much preferred that, right? Because it gave me cause and effect. There was a relationship where I could actually have a conversation with the person that was dishing out the punishment, and I felt I knew what I was doing wrong. And so, but because it was done in such a condescending manner, as well as that, despite me being punished for doing said thing, they would also be doing said thing later down the track, which completely changed the way that I viewed them in the first place, then I didn't want to do anything anymore. And so and then I just lashed out. And so what saved me was reading books and then keeping to myself and gaining a better understanding of the world through the works of different authors. And then training at the gym and doing my work as a PT and discovering life. Like that helped me the most. And so that hardened me up, and that gave me qualities that I feel that I needed in order to pursue opportunities. And so the way that I was brought up, I don't believe, in my opinion, was conducive to my success. Like what was conducive to my success now was the actions that I took. And having a good circle allows for you to realize that there are different ways to approach success. And so if you're in a place where you don't feel as though that either you're worth or you don't feel as though that you're making any progress, you need to change places. Like that's essentially it. And so you might be in a place where the boiling water softens you up, where you need to be a bit hardened. And so you go to a different environment. Sometimes you might be as hard as hell and you might need to soften up a little bit so that you might actually be a human being for once and treat people that in a way that you like to be treated. But a great example of this is Goggins, right? And so he had a hard life. Like if you've read his book and like listened to him talk, he's had a hard existence. And so the way he dealt with that was through ultramarathon running and training, obsessively staying hard to the point where it's beyond humanity. And so a lot of the time, like when he does talk, yeah, it's inspiring, it's motivating, but then it also just doesn't sound human. It almost sounds robotic, right? And so not all humans operate that way, which is what makes Goggins, right? Yeah. And then everyone else. Yeah. And everyone operates differently. So some person might listen to Goggins and go, hey, I'm going to be the best in the world, and they become the best in the world, right? Someone else might listen to Goggins and they'll go, holy shit, he's a psychopath, well, I don't want anything to do with that, right? And so, like we said earlier, it's about perception. And so if you perceive your circle to be someone inspiring, to be people of inspiration, to be people of standards and leadership and things like that, and that's how you perceive yourself, that's where you go. Where if you perceive yourself as a loser, or if you perceive yourself as somebody who's not going to make it, or who's scared of making it, or things like that, that's who you'll end up attracting, and that's who you'll end up being with, and that's who you'll end up because you made that choice. And so you've got to audit yourself and rewire yourself so that then the circle that you end up attracting then is conducive to the person that you want to be and that you need to be for you, for your family, for your friends, just for your life in general. Because you don't want to, I don't know about you, but I don't want to live a life where I didn't get to make all the decisions and experience all the things in the world that I was able to experience and share that with people that I love. And so being able to be autonomous and having self-autonomy and consistently making decisions that line up with the life that I want, then life will be better. And so I'm not going to get them all right. I know that. You know that. And everyone else knows that. And so sometimes I do take things with a stick up my ass. And I do sometimes go, oh, hey, you know what, like, that wasn't called for. And sometimes I make some minor inconvenience this massive thing. And so it's one of those things that I'm still learning. And so by having people that can see my own idiosyncrasies and go, hey, you know what, that's what makes Carlo, and he's working through it. Hey, that's magic. Where if someone just goes, oh hey, that's the way you've always been and I don't want to deal with that, so be it. That's not an issue for me either, because then that's less for you and more for somebody else that does care. And so being able to recognize who's who in those circumstances, you're better off with the people that will encourage you to be better and then operate at a level that you want to get to, so that then you're going, hey, I'm inspired by this person, so I'm going to do better. I'm going to be better. And sometimes that person's going to be yourself. Like, you've got to inspire yourself every single day. Like getting up out of bed every single day and going, hey, I fucking inspire myself and I do the best that I can because I want to live the best life possible. For the first probably few years of your own personal development, it's all going to be on you. And it's not until like you're so clear that nothing's going to stop you is when the other people start gravitating towards you. And so if you're half and half, you'll always attract half and half. And so we don't want half and half. We don't do things half-assed. We go full ass all the time. Ass to grass, balls to wall, pedal to the metal, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Right? All in, all the time. And I really hope that your new circle of friends all go in as well. Because when you all go in together, you all get to celebrate your success together. When you don't go all in together, well, some of you might get here, some of you might get there, some of you might get there, and no one will be anywhere near each other. And you know what? That might be bad in some perceptions, but in other perceptions, that might be a good thing, because all those people made a decision to go however far they decide to go. And so it's all in good and it's all in bad, but like I was saying to Brenden just before we turned on the record button, right, there really isn't any good, there isn't any bad, it's only the way that you see it. And so if you see your circle as someone who, as people that drive you, that inspire you, amazing. If you see your circle as people that are toxic, that are not they're unmotivating and they're not really going anywhere, you know what, that might be great too, because you might be comfortable with them. But you can't complain about the life that you're not working for. That's exactly it. And so anything that's good, anything that's bad, that comes from you, right? But if you choose the left side and go, nah, hey, you know what, I just want to smoke pot and I want to drink alcohol and I want to gamble and do all that shit, great. Don't complain when you don't have money to make investments and that you don't have money to actually go out with meaningful people and develop meaningful relationships, because you're all here. Like, you need to go all the way over here to do everything that you say that you want to do. And so this is why we talked about your actions aligning with your word, like the last podcast and many other podcasts. But a good group of friends, good network, a good circle of positive influence will always drive you further than the ones that aren't as driven, aren't willing to go the distance.
And I find though that them negative influence can have a positive influence on you as well. For example, on Friday I was doing deadlifts. What was it? 4 sets of 130, 4 sets of 8, 130, and four sets of 8 at 140. Right before I started my set, there was a loaded bar of weight on there, the plates. So I did the right thing and unloaded the plates. Then I realised that the bar was the smaller bar as well, so I couldn't even use that bar. So I put it back up and then got the right bar out. So to me, look, you might be fatigued or whatever after your set, but it's respect for the next person to put your weights away. So the standard that you set for yourself in them situations I feel it has a flow-on effect to everything else as well.
Honestly, dude, if I see...
Do you want to be that person that leaves stuff behind and not complete your job? Or do you want to be the person that follows through on things and does the right thing by people and not being sort of inconsiderate?
No, dude, honestly, if I see a 10 out of 10 at the gym, right, but she doesn't re-rack her weight, she's a 0. Straight away. Like, it is not even a question, right? Like, if you don't re-rack your weight, you're an automatic 0, right? That's done. Like I have confidence in myself, right? That like I can attract beautiful women, but at the same time, like there are people out there that don't rack their weights, and if I see you, like, you know, like you know how this like we listen, we don't judge. Like if I see somebody that doesn't re-rack weights, bro, I'm judging straight away, right? Like only God can judge, right? If I'm in the gym, right, and someone doesn't re-rack their weights, man, that's just like, well, you know what, God, I ask for privileges to judge because that's not right. That's not right at all. And so it's one of those things where understanding that being considerate is very important, despite how you feel, right? If you are spiteful and you are angry, that is no reason to be inconsiderate.
Yeah.
If you are going through pain or you're going through something that you don't want to talk about, that is not a reason to be inconsiderate or to project your bullshit on that particular person because they might feel as though that what they say triggers you for whatever reason. And so people who understand self-development and understand positive psychology understand that. And when people know that they can do better and then they go and do better, they're the people. They're the people. People who also know that they're not doing shit, right? But then who are also willing to go and do shit and then actually go and do shit. They're the people. Like, we're not perfect, we're human. And being able to recognize that we are human and to be present and to be understanding is so important. And so having the people around you who know that, like, that'll drive you to your success. And so you and I both know that, and people in our lives who we think might not know that probably know that too. It's just that they're going through their own dilemmas, they're going through their own stories, their own bullshit in their mind, and sometimes we might be too critical. Sometimes we might think that we know better than they do. And you know what, to some extent, perhaps we do. But then it isn't our pejorative to go, oh, well, we know better than you do, right? Or this, or that, you should do this, or you should do that, right? It's not. Like, if someone I know, right, and there are people that I know that don't operate the same way that I do, I just keep my distance because I know that if I have a conversation with them, then it will end up just back and forth where people are pointing out flaws or I point out flaws. And so the old Bible phrase goes, why look at the speck in your brother's eyes when you've got logs in your own? And so I do my best to ensure that I'm looking at my own logs. And so if I see specks in my brother's eyes, I'm going to say, hey, look, there's a speck, right? But I'm not going to just go, well, it's your fault, it's your this, it's your that, yeah. If you want an honest conversation with me and we're both present for it, hey, we're going to have that honest conversation. Like, we've had conversations before where I go to you, hey, I want your honest opinion about something, and you just set me straight to the fucking shitter. But I appreciate it because I asked for it, and you also will tell me how it is, and vice versa. And so knowing the difference is also really crucial. And so by being an influence, you will influence people. By being interesting, people will become interested. If you're the other way around, where you want people interested in you, but you're as boring as batshit, then forget it. And so you're asking someone else, you're extending to someone else to be interested in you, meanwhile you're contributing nothing. That's never gonna work. Like, what one-sided relationship do you expect to have with someone who is just going to abide by what you say at all times? Like, that doesn't work ever. Like, we can go into masculine and feminine roles, but like that's a whole different ball game, a whole different topic, right? That we can go into depth at a different time. But one-sided relationships don't work like that. And if you're going to have a positive circle of influence, then you need to expect to contribute. Like, that's the bare minimum, that you contribute. Because if you don't, then don't expect anything, ever. Like, and I think that's where we can end this, because by you not contributing, then for you to expect something in return is not only ignorant, right, but it's also incredibly naive. You're not a child.
Yeah.
You're not dependent. You might feel like that you are, right? And there are moments where I do, but you're not. And so by being dependent on someone else, you just let go of the power that you have and you just give it to somebody else. And there is no circle in the world that wants to deal with that, ever, right? Unless you're the government, right, who just want dependence, right, on them, right? But again, another topic for another day, right? I know. And so, but being a positive influence means that you have a responsibility, and the responsibility that you undertake is often the hardest, which means that you have to regulate and audit yourself on a consistent basis so that then you can become that influence.
Sums it up.
Sums it up. That was a huge talk today.
Yeah.
I hope you got something out of my ADHD rant, because I tend to, when we have conversations, I go on a million tangents. And so I really do hope you got something out of that today. And subscribe to our YouTube channel so you hear more ADHD rants and more awesome conversations about how you can be better and be excellent.
100%. Have a good one, guys.